contact for this project. And then we're going to allow some time for questions and answers from the group so that if, in case you need some information clarified from the presentation, we can answer that for you before we get into the public comment time. And we do have some staff here on the call that are able to answer questions this evening. And then once we have those questions answered, we'll get into our public feedback time. And so that's when we'd really like to hear from you and allow that space for you to share with us any reactions or comments that you have. And then we'll close out by talking about the next steps. So the purpose of our engagement tonight, this spectrum here that I'm sharing with you on the screen, this is called IAP2. And what this shows you is the process that we use for engagement. And really, what does that mean when I say engagement? It's really how is your voice going to be used in this process? And so tonight we fall under the consult on the spectrum there, the second box from the left. And what that means is we're here to get your feedback and hear what you have to say about the approach to managing bulky item disposal in a sustainable way. As part of consult, we're here to obtain feedback from the community, your feedback here this evening, and we'll also keep you informed. You'll hear a lot of information this evening from both John and Laura. And we want to listen to your concerns, comments, and questions. And for that reason, that's why we are recording this evening, so that all members of our project team can hear what you have to say, even if they're on the call tonight or not. And we want to capture all those thoughts accurately. So we will hear about the bulky item management proposal this evening. And based on your input, some things may move around and other ideas may be considered. But in general, the structure will remain the same. And you'll hear all about that during the presentation this evening. And then the recommendations will be made by the Sustainability Commission and also city staff. And they're going to make that final recommendation to the City Council. And then the City Council makes the final decision. And just to note that the Sustainability Commission and the City Council meetings, they are being held virtually right now, but they are open to the public and you can watch them live, or you can watch them after anytime that's convenient for you. But I would encourage everybody to watch those, especially concerning this item if you have a need for that. Just a note for those that are not familiar with WebEx, if you take your mouse and go to the left side of your screen and you hover over it, you'll see a plus button and a minus button. You can hit that plus button to increase the size of your font just for your view, just to make it easier for you to view this presentation. Okay. So moving into our meeting agreements, these are agreements that we establish at the beginning of most of our meetings, whether we hold those internally or externally, but especially while we're doing engagement. The first is that we ask you to be respectful during our time this evening and be honest. Honesty is really important to us as we're listening to your input. And all ideas tonight have good intent. So with this in mind, we're here to listen to everyone's perspective and for those that took time out of their evening to join us. All voices are important in this process. And we ask that you hold that agreement for everybody, even if the ideas being shared are ones that you don't agree with. Everybody here has good intent this evening. And then just to have an open mind. We're here to listen to people from the community with different backgrounds and have an open mind as we're hearing different perspectives. Just a couple administrative agreements here. We do have a chat box feature. This is similar to Zoom meetings if you've used those. If you go to the bottom right of your screen, you can click on chat to open the chat box. And you may already see some messages in here from Ellen, who you heard from earlier. She's here to monitor that chat box. And Ellen Bialis is a Deputy Director of Public Works at the city, and she's part of the project team. So this chat box is here for you to use throughout your time this evening. Everything that is submitted here will be saved in the notes and shared with the project team and the Sustainability Commission. And that also does include any messages that are sent privately and those that are sent to the group. So please use this space to submit your questions. And we also ask that during this time you do mute your microphone when you aren't speaking, just to avoid background noise and distractions from the presentation. Sometimes we're not aware we're making that background noise. So we do have the ability to mute you if you accidentally stay off mute. So just keep that in mind. We do have some folks on the phone that are participating by using a telephone. You do have the ability to mute your phone. Depending on the device, that's usually you just tap on your screen and hit the mute button. So that is available to our phone call users. I would just like to highlight here before we get into the presentation how to participate this evening. I did mention the chat box, and that is going to be available throughout the course of our time this evening. You can make comments or ask questions here. Once we reach a period where we're pausing for questions, those clarifying questions on the presentation, we'll try to address those questions that were asked in the chat box first, and then allow for some clarifying questions, especially for the phone callers who don't have access to that chat box. And again, as a reminder, all those comments will be saved and shared with the project team and the Sustainability Commission. So really you can choose to participate either verbally or via the chat this evening. Either one are great ways to participate. And we're just hoping to hear from everybody that wants to speak this evening. When you do speak, we welcome you to unmute yourself at that time, and you can participate during the feedback period. We do expect a number of callers this evening that were registered for this. So we are asking that you limit your comments to under 2 minutes. And so with that being said, I will be monitoring during the feedback time. So during the presentation, I do encourage you to jot down your thoughts and ideas just to make good use of that time when it comes to your turn. And then I just did make a note here of the 5-second rule. It's really hard on these virtual conversations, sometimes with people jumping in and out, and sometimes we do talk over each other. So just try to allow, maybe when somebody's finished speaking, maybe counting 5 seconds in your head to make sure that that person is done before jumping in. But if we do have overlap, we'll try and be mindful of that and make sure that we take turns and hear from everybody. And I'm really happy to see everybody here tonight, and we're going to make our best attempt to make sure that we hear from everybody. That also being said, some people really like to reflect on the information that they hear before they want to provide information back and additional thoughts. So at the end of the presentation, we will supply an email and a link where you can provide more information. Maybe you want to write it down in a letter or an email, or just pick up the phone and make a phone call and speak to somebody. We'll continue to collect those comments after this evening. So you do have an opportunity to contribute after tonight if you do not make a choice to speak this evening. We do encourage those comments. And we do have a survey that's available that's found at blm.mn/bulk. And that survey does reflect some of what we are asking here tonight. So this is another great way for you to provide your input, and maybe you're more comfortable typing out your responses instead of speaking in a larger group like this. So that space is available to you as well. Okay, Ellen, just to check in, did we have John ability to join us?
Yes, we have John on board, so I think he's ready to roll. You are.
Great. So at this time, I'll just introduce former Commission Sustainability Commission member, John Hymas, and John will kick us off with our presentation this evening. Good evening, John. And John, you are still on mute.
All right. Glad I could start off that way. Give everybody a good pandemic laugh. Thank you for the introduction. Yes, I have experienced some technical challenges. Hopefully that was it for the night. I am having a little bit of trouble seeing the slides, but I should be okay here. So good evening, everyone. I'm John Jaimes. I'm a former member of the Sustainability Commission, where I served from 2017 through 2020. I'm also a member of the work group that developed the proposed changes to the annual cleanup program. We know that the curbside cleanup is a very popular program, but it's also a very challenging program to operate. The City Council has been discussing how to make changes to the way bulky items are managed. The curbside cleanup program is very costly. It is increasingly challenging for the haulers to operate, and most importantly, it's not environmentally sustainable. So in 2019, the City Council requested that the Sustainability Commission look at the potential opportunities to reduce the ecological impact of the curbside cleanup program. As a result of that, the Commission created a work group made up of commissioners and staff to develop and evaluate alternatives. The Commission also contracted for a study to look at the current curbside cleanup program to determine the types of items that are being placed at the curb during the cleanup program and to what extent those items could be reused or recycled. I know that there's a general feeling that the vast majority of materials put out at the curb get reused or recycled, but as I'll talk about real soon here, is that that's not really the case. The data from the report provided a foundation for our proposal for how bulky items like fridges, tables, mattresses, etc., how they could be managed more sustainably. We brought forward our recommendations to the City Council in May of last year, and at that time we received direction to continue developing the plan and to bring the plan forward to the community for feedback. And that brings us to where we are tonight. The purpose of the cleanup has always been to keep the city clean. That's the main reason that the cleanup program came into existence. The cleanup program provides residents with a method for disposing of bulky items that are difficult to get rid of. We do this to ensure that those items don't end up staying in people's backyards for years and years, get dumped in our parks or down in the Minnesota River Valley. The program started way back in the 1960s. I was surprised to find that out, and was originally part of a citywide neighborhood cleanup program called Clean Up, Paint Up, Fix Up. The program was designed to help beautify the city and was originally paid for by citywide general taxes. The program was discontinued in the 90s due to the budget restraints. And in the late 1990s, the program was restarted and the costs were paid by a fee to all residential properties. Due to the cost and environmental impact, in 2018, the city placed limits on the amount of things that residents could put out, and those limits are strictly enforced. The limits have helped to reduce the cost and amount of waste generated, but the program is still not sustainable. This slide lists the primary ecological drivers for making the change. The program, first and foremost, generates a lot of waste. And to put that into perspective, in 2019, the city's residential garbage program, the weekly pickup of trash, generated just over 17,500 tons of garbage for the entire year. In 2019, the haulers picked up 1,500 tons of garbage during just the curbside cleanup. That's roughly 9% of the weight of our total residential garbage for an entire year, but only in 5 days. Also, the carbon footprint for getting that trash from the curbside cleanup to the landfill is extremely high. Approximately 60 tons of carbon are emitted just to haul that material collected from the curbside cleanup program. These pictures show common examples of items that are put at the curb, and if you look closely, they don't really look like trash. In fact, as I mentioned before, the study concluded that 35%, more than a third of the items that are collected at the curb on pickup day, could likely be reused or recycled. So again, those numbers come from pickup day after items have been picked over for several days. Usually, at least I know in my neighborhood, people start putting items out on Wednesday or Thursday. So there's several days for people to pick through them, and still more than a third of the items that get disposed could be reused or recycled. So often we hear from residents that the stuff they put out in the curb always gets picked up by the reusers and nothing of quality gets put in the garbage truck. Personally, what I see oftentimes is that stuff gets moved around from yard to yard. I know things end up in my yard that I didn't put out. Some things get taken, some things don't. But all of these items shown in the picture here were shown in this slide were landfilled during the 2019 cleanup. This is just a small example of the photos that we took. All of these items were left over after they had been picked through, and all of our survey data, all of the photos in our report are from the morning of the actual pickups, right before these items were tossed in the garbage truck. Shown here is the state's waste hierarchy that lists the environmentally preferred options for managing waste. This is an expansion of the common reduce, reuse, recycle hierarchy that we use when talking about preferred methods for managing trash. As you can see here, landfilling is the least preferred environmental option. Our weekly trash is taken to the Hennepin Energy Recovery Facility, also known as HERC, where it's incinerated and creates steam heat for downtown Minneapolis and is converted into electricity that's sold to the grid. Unfortunately, this facility is not designed to take the bulky items that are picked up from our curbside cleanup program. The items collected during curbside cleanup don't go to HERC, but they're typically landfilled in Burnsville. This visualization was created by Bloomington staff and shows the proposed size of the Burnsville sanitary landfill expansion. As you may know, the city of Bloomington has taken a position in opposition to this proposed expansion. So here's the dilemma. We don't want this trash mountain, which would be visible from the southern border of our city, but at the same time, we need some place to dispose of all of the material collected from our annual cleanup program, some 1,500 to 2,000 tons that are collected each year, if no changes are made to the program. What I've reviewed so far is the data and context that the work group used to consider and evaluate alternatives to our current cleanup program. We also wanted to ensure that any proposed alternative is consistent with the city's strategic priorities and the overall purpose of the annual cleanup program. The working group identified the following objectives for evaluating alternatives. Keeping Bloomington clean. In other words, we don't want to create a program where frustrated residents resort to illegal dumping. Increase the environmental benefits by maximizing recycling and reuse of these items. Improve cost effectiveness by minimizing the cost, and improving accessibility by making the program available to as many residents as possible. After reviewing the study data, brainstorming ideas, and looking at what other cities are doing in the metro area, the work group proposed a new model. That new model is bulky item vouchers paired with community cleanup events. Given the analysis, which Laura will walk us through next, the clear winner is a voucher program paired with a community cleanup event. It provides the greatest ecological benefits, the lowest costs, and the broadest accessibility. There is less convenience, but there's a lot of benefit to making these changes. I'm going to turn it over now to City Staff Laura Horner, who will provide a brief overview of what a voucher program paired with the community cleanup event might look like, and also to provide a comparison of the options that were considered.
Good evening, I'm Laura Horner, the city's Garbage and Recycling Program Coordinator. Thank you again for allowing us the opportunity to share more information with you tonight about our proposed plan and for your willingness to share feedback with us after our presentation. So the plan includes two different methods to handle bulky items. To continue offering a curbside pickup, each household in the city's garbage and recycling program would receive 2 vouchers that are each good for the collection of 1 bulky item. For example, 1 bulky item could be an old refrigerator, a television, a mattress, or a couch. The resident would schedule that pickup like they do now through utility billing, and the resident could schedule that bulky item pickup anytime throughout the year. And in a voucher system, those mattresses, appliances, and electronics could be recycled. The other part of the proposed plan includes holding 1 or 2 community cleanup drop-off events throughout the year. Residents would bring their items to a central location to dispose of on a single day. The drop-off events would be open for any Bloomington resident. So this includes people who live in apartment buildings, condominiums, or townhomes that don't have the city's garbage and recycling service. The picture here gives you an idea of what that drop-off could look like. The city would contract with several vendors to be on site at a central location to collect materials. By doing this allows for materials to be sorted into several different categories for recycling and reuse. Some examples of what you could recycle at a drop-off event include mattresses, tires, appliances, electronics, and shredded paper. We also envision a reuse area where residents could shop and take home different reusable items that households have brought in. So in these next slides, I will compare the proposed plan and the current cleanup program against what John mentioned we are trying to accomplish by meeting the city's strategic priorities of environmental sustainability, a high quality service, and inclusion and equity. So when looking at environmental sustainability, in our current curbside program, appliances and brush are collected separately during the cleanup for recycling and composting. And this amounts to 155 tons of material that was recycled in 2019. We know that there is also some reuse that happens during the cleanup as people survey piles and pick up items that they want to take home or possibly fix up and sell. We can't know for certain where those materials end up or if they ultimately end up getting disposed of as garbage after they are picked up. When considering the vouchers in our proposed plan, plus a community cleanup event, the amount of material that could be diverted nearly doubles. As during the voucher program, as I mentioned earlier, appliances, electronics, and mattresses could be collected for recycling. And during a drop-off, as listed on this slide, there are several additional materials that could be collected for recycling. So when looking at the cost of each option, the cost of our current curbside cleanup program has increased over the past few years. In 2020, the final cost for the program was just over $1 million. As you can see, in 2019, the program was $930,000. The higher cost in 2020 was due in part to residents setting out more garbage than they did in 2019. And also because the cost to dispose of the garbage, or the tipping fee, continues to increase as landfills are increasingly reluctant to take this material. For 2021 cleanup this year, the cost for disposal of garbage at landfills has increased again by 8.5%, which will increase our disposal costs further. At this time, we are still exploring the best way to charge all users for the proposed community cleanup drop-off events. In other communities with similar events, often residents who bring materials to a drop-off are charged directly at that event, depending on what they bring. Certain items are collected at no cost, and certain items that are more costly to handle, like electronics, would have a small charge. That way, the cost of a community drop-off event is covered by all users and not just those with the city's garbage and recycling service. We were able to develop estimated costs for a drop-off based on similar cleanup events in neighboring cities. The vouchers for disposal of bulky items throughout the year through the voucher program would be available, as I mentioned, to households with the city's garbage and recycling service and would be paid for by those households, similar to how the curbside cleanup fee is charged on utility bills today. We received a cost proposal from a vendor for a voucher service. And based on that proposal, we anticipate that curbside cleanup fee could be reduced by 1/3 to half of our current curbside cleanup fee. Our current program is not available, as I mentioned, to residents that do not have the city's garbage and recycling service, aside from a few townhomes and apartments that do opt into the program. The vouchers would similarly only be available to households who pay for garbage and recycling, but the community cleanup events would be available to all households, to all residents within the city that live in apartments, condominiums, and townhomes, therefore expanding the accessibility to those residents to dispose of bulky items. And in our current program does not require the use of vehicles to dispose of items, as those items are collected from the curb. An on-call voucher, as proposed, also would not require the use of vehicles, and some items not accepted during the curbside cleanup currently, like electronics, could be accepted during with the use of those vouchers. The community cleanup event, as proposed, would require use of a vehicle and therefore may not be as accessible if residents couldn't arrange to use an alternative vehicle. So in summary, we believe that the recommended alternative, a program that includes bulky item vouchers paired with the community cleanup events, will provide the greatest reduction in carbon footprint and divert the most material from being landfilled. It also provides accessibility to the greatest number of Bloomington residents and would provide the greatest reduction in cost. However, we also know that this would be a significant change to the program, and it would be a little bit less convenient than our current curbside cleanup program. Because of this, we also know that any implementation of changes would require significant education and community outreach as to the real reasons why we are looking to make a change to the program in the first place. So with that ends our presentation this evening. And we would like to now open up the floor to you all right now. So during this time, we will have 2 different sections where we will hear from you. And in this first section, we want to answer clarifying questions from participants. So if you have any specific questions about the presentation or about what we are proposing, this would be the time where we can answer those questions. I will be able to answer those questions. And I also will have Ellen Bialis, our Deputy Director, and Commissioner Jaimez on the line to provide input on those responses as well. After those clarifying questions are answered, we would then switch over to gathering your feedback, and Barb will facilitate that feedback portion. So at this time, if you do have a question, you could go ahead and unmute and ask that question. Or as Barb mentioned in the beginning of the presentation, if you'd rather not ask a question verbally, you can put questions into a chat box. We will address questions in that chat box verbally for the group tonight, but we will not be typing responses back in that chat box, so the project staff can really focus on answering the questions throughout the presentation. However, that being said, if there are questions we aren't able to answer tonight in the presentation, we are going to send all questions we received tonight and our responses to attendees in an email after the presentation. So again, at this time, hopefully we can stop talking a little bit and allow you to ask any questions and provide your feedback. And again, we'd like you to, at this point, just ask questions, and we'll move into the feedback portion after this.
And Laura, just as a note, for those residents that are calling in this evening, I have unmuted you right now. So if you do have a question, you should be able to ask it. We do have a few questions in the chat box right now, Laura, so I'll give you a couple of those to get us started. One question is, how much of cost going forward is for landfill for the 65% of the items which are trash? I think that may be thinking that of the 35% of items that we actually do recycle them, but actually everything that's left on the curb right now is going to the landfill.
Yes, that's right. So based on the proposal that we received from a vendor to pick up materials from your curb through the voucher program, based on that proposal, the curbside cleanup fee you pay today could be reduced by about 1/3 to 1/2. And in that vendor would be able to recycle the mattresses collected, as well as appliances and electronics.
So a second question is,
Can I clarify that?
how will traffic be handled for the drop-off events?
Sure. So we have started to do research within the city to find a site that would accommodate traffic flow for a drop-off event. We do have one site in mind at this time, the city's Western Maintenance Facility, that does really facilitate a good flow of traffic in and out for residents. I think a lot of the potential wait times or traffic that is often associated with a drop-off event can be due to not having a large enough site and not necessarily having the best education to residents about how to prepare their vehicles for unloading at a drop-off to really reduce those wait times. So I think as we develop any drop-off program, we would keep those in mind. That being said, we do anticipate there will be some wait at a drop-off event, but we will be doing our best in the planning to really alleviate that traffic issue. And Ellen, if you have anything to add there, feel free to chime in.
Yeah, I think you did a nice job of answering that, Laura. There are some ways that we can help move that along, but we can never plan for exactly when people would show up at an event. So if we have a period where we have a lot of people show up at the same time, there may be a little bit of a wait while that traffic kind of clears itself out. It does look like Eric may have his hand up. Eric, did you have a question for us?
I actually have two questions, if that's okay.
Sure.
My first question is for the community drop-off events. Obviously, the goal is to recycle more, and that's great, but surely there will still be some trash. Will that trash still be going to the Burnsville landfill?
I think that could be going to the landfill, yes. Yes, but
So it'll go to the same place that it goes now.
it would, but based on what we have seen in other communities with drop-off events, the volume of trash that's collected at a drop-off is significantly less than what is collected during our curbside cleanup.
Mm-hmm. And then my second question is, in the presentation, there is a lot of, we anticipate and we think and we could and things like that, which is fine with any new program. But how will the outcomes of this policy change be measured, right? The goal obviously is more recycling and reuse. Will anyone be actually monitoring that and then, issuing a report? And what happens if it's not as good as anticipated?
We will be monitoring the amount of material that's collected for recycling and reuse so we can continue to, I think that you can't really measure, you can't make changes based on things you're not measuring. So we certainly would be measuring that each year throughout the drop-off events. And as you mentioned, if things don't turn out as expected, we would continue to be making tweaks to the program to increase the amount of material we can recycle. We did base all of our projections on actual events in other cities that have well-established drop-off programs. So we looked at the cities of St. Louis Park, St. Paul, and Eden Prairie. And again, they do measure the exact amount of material that is recycled and reused at those events to base our projections on those actual figures.
Great, thank you.
Laura, there are a few other questions in the chat box. One is the presentation implies that the cost of the proposed program will reduce the fee on our water bill by 50%. Is that correct?
Yes, as based on the proposal that we have received from a vendor to provide the collection of items at your curb, we do anticipate that that cost would be about a third to half of the cost of our current program.
Another question we have is, does the Hennepin County drop-off on 96th Street pair with this program? They noticed that light bulbs are one of the items that we have that sometimes ends up in the landfill. And they thought that things like this could be brought to the Hennepin County drop-off, also small appliances and things like that. Has the collection at Hennepin County changed?
It has not. The Hennepin County hazardous waste sites will continue to operate. We don't anticipate any change to that. I think we do know that there is some overlap in the materials that can be brought to the Hennepin County sites, as well as the materials that can be collected at your curb. But the difference there is that through the collection at your curb, we're able to make that collection a lot more convenient for residents than bringing it to a drop-off. And if you have additional materials that aren't able to be collected at your curb, then we will have those drop-off events. And again, we know that there is some overlap to the Hennepin County site, but we don't necessarily see that as a bad thing, but another opportunity for residents to get rid of material maybe at a slightly reduced cost to the fees at the drop-off.
If I can chime in, Laura, I would add that I think this is the question identifies a good opportunity that would add benefit to the city's cleanup program for things like collecting light bulbs to be recycled. So the way the cleanup program currently works with stuff scattered throughout the entire city, it would be difficult to find a recycler of light bulbs to go around the entire city and find light bulbs here and there. But by bringing them all to a central location, it would be possible for the city to have an area where we just collect light bulbs to be recycled and could potentially contract with a vendor that would recycle those. I'm not saying for sure that would be the case, but those are some of those harder to recycle items that when you're doing that type of collection in one central spot once or twice a year, it makes it much more cost effective to do, and a vendor would be more interested in participating and taking that material from city residents and recycling it rather than it ending up in the trash.
I just want to be cognizant that we may have some people who want to verbally ask questions. We do continue to have some questions in the chat. Is there anybody that would like to just ask a question?
I have a question.
Sure, go ahead.
Hi, this is Lisa, and I haven't heard anything mentioned about the brush. You know, that you can up to 2 or 3 inches in diameter bundled, set on the curb. you know, Bloomington doesn't have a place to drop off brush like the city of Minnetonka does. And also I wanted to say that I have found it extremely difficult to get rid of brush that's greater than 3 inches that wasn't being picked up on my curb. Last year, I went in with some neighbors to rent a chipper, and it was over $300 for 4 hours for a few of us, and then it didn't work when we got it. And so we weren't even able to accomplish it, and we did get our money back. But I mean, it was a huge hurdle to do that. And so I wondered if this curbside, your future program does take into account the brush, and would you be willing to even expand it?
I think we haven't considered brush as a potential item to be picked up through the bulky item vouchers. Not that we can't consider that. I think we could look into that. And I think that could also be a possibility for collection at our drop-off events, to have a location for brush to be deposited as well. Again, we are still in this program development piece, and I don't know for certain that that would be feasible, but I think it's something that we could certainly explore.
Thank you.
Can I ask a question about the townhouse and condo?
Sure.
Sure.
So we all, yes, thank you. So we already pay for the monthly HOA, and now I'm appreciate that the city of Bloomington opened, the program for us to access the city wide event for the cleanup. But does the program cost us any extra money on top of the HOA fees? Or will you attract the money from the HOA fee from our, regular monthly payment already?
Sure. So the drop-off portion of the proposed plan is the piece that would be available for residents in condominiums and apartments and townhomes. And those drop-off events would only be something that those residents would be paying for if they come to use the event. So if they choose to bring an item to the event, you would pay at that event for what you're bringing in. So there would be no increase or effect on your HOA fees. As I also mentioned earlier, in our current curbside cleanup program, there are some townhomes and condominiums that have chosen to opt into the cleanup, and those properties only can opt in if the homeowners association chooses to pay for every unit to have access to that service. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yes, makes sense. Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
I have a few more questions in the chat. Will staff be sorting through everything that's dropped off, I'm presuming at the drop-off event, to sort out recyclables?
Sure. In the slide I showed with the community drop-off event, kind of a bird's eye view of what those look like, the way those events would be structured is we'd contract with several different vendors that each collect different items. So those items would be not sorted through from one pile, but as you're bringing items into the event, you would drop your electronics with one vendor, and then at the next station, you would drop your appliances. And then if you had reusable items, those would be dropped in the reusable item section. So that's what allows us to collect more material for recycling and reuse, because we don't need to do that sorting on our own.
I have two more questions that are fairly similar, and that is, if you have more than 2 bulky items, can you still schedule them to be picked up for a fee? And then similarly, a question, is there an option to pay for additional items to be picked up during one of the 2 trips that you would use your vouchers?
So yes, you could still schedule additional pickups for a fee through utility billing. I think, again, as we're working through the program details, there might be a way to facilitate the collection of more than 2 items during that pickup time for a fee to reduce the number of trips that are used. So if there were more than 2 items, that third item that's picked up at the same time would be the only one that incurs a fee, an extra fee.
Do we have any other questions that people just want to ask verbally?
Sure,
I
I'll
would
ask.
like to add.
I'll ask. Oh, go ahead.
I would just like to add my comments about the brush. We really need that. I relied on that to do cleanup in the spring of branches I cut. So I'm disappointed that you haven't already looked at it and hope you take that very seriously. Thank you.
I'll just ask, and I apologize because I joined late, but if vouchers aren't used in a year, can they be carried over? And if they're not used at all, is there any sort of benefit to those certificates, or do they just go unused?
Ellen, do you want to take that question?
Sure. At this point, the way that we're looking, because we're kind of negotiating a fee for the vouchers with the haulers, the vouchers would need to be used within that 1-year period. So they would not carry over into the following year. And they really wouldn't have value beyond just the pickup of the 2 items. I do have a question kind of about rainy weather. Somebody had participated in the study, and they said that there were many items that were damaged by rain, and that this seems like a much more effective way to recycle the reusable items. Wondering if there was a way to submit item information ahead of time to better plan and match up collectors.
That'd be during the voucher portion? So
I'm thinking that might be during the drop-off event. I think it would be very hard for us to have people submit all of that information ahead of time. I think our goal would be to have several vendors at the drop-offs who would collect a variety of materials that day. And basically they would take them into their collection vehicles as soon as people brought them in. I don't know that there would be any good way for us to plan exactly what would be picked up ahead of time. However, we can also provide some information to residents, giving them some tips for how they might want to pack their car or their vehicle as they travel through the site, so that items that would be collected at the front of the cleanup would be kind of on the top of their load. And, subsequently, as they move through the site, they would understand kind of what order the collection would be in.
I have a question.
I have a question about the vouchers.
Okay.
Are the vouchers, the 2 vouchers that you're proposing for each resident, are those free, or do you have to pay for the vouchers?
The cost of the vouchers would be funded through the curbside cleanup fee on your utility bill. So those wouldn't be free, but based on the proposal we've received for the collection of those items, we anticipate that curbside cleanup fee could be reduced by about 1/3 to 1/2.
But I mean, in order to, are you just mailing the vouchers out to people who pay a water garbage bill? Or do you have to go down and pick up a voucher and pay something additional to get that voucher?
No, the city would keep track of how many vouchers a resident has used throughout the year through our utility billing program software. So as you called in to schedule that bulky item pickup for one of your vouchers, we could look through your program history to see what you've used already in that year. And if you hadn't used your vouchers yet, that would be one of your pickups at no cost. So, and then after,
Oh, I see.
yeah,
So it's not a physical ticket that you have. Okay.
yeah, right.
Okay. So I see it. So you get, say, call it 2 credits
Sure.
and or vouchers,
Yeah.
and that's already part of your bill. So you don't have to pay anything additional when you use it. Even if it's for an electronic that normally costs something to drop it off at Hennepin County?
Yes. Yep, that would be included.
Okay. Oh, that makes sense. Okay, thank you very
Okay.
much.
Thank you. Yeah, kind of a follow-up to that would be, and I'm sure this was done with the old system where people would just bring things into our community to get picked up. Is there any policy against that with this voucher system where people, are prohibited in theory from, selling or having somebody drop something off and having it picked up, or does that not really factor into this?
I think that is a difficult thing for the city to be able to really control, as is the case with our current curbside cleanup program, to stop people from coming to pick up those materials once they're out at your curb. I think we could continue to kind of discourage that through some of our materials. However, it's not something that is really easy for the city to have much control over.
Understandable. And I just kind of wonder from a policy standpoint, because for some residents, they might see it as, well, I never used the service, but I could recoup what I'm paying for the service by essentially selling my vouchers. And whether or not that should be outrightly, against policy, or just, leave it to the residents to kind of, use these vouchers as they see fit.
Yeah, it would be accounted for in their, personal billing statement. So, they would really only get the 2 per year for the vouchers. So, I mean, if they were, let's say that, grandma had a couch that she was wanting to get rid of and the resident had a voucher, it would be really difficult for the city to, determine whether or not, that was a voucher from the specific household or whatever, but it would only be picked up at that specific household. And that would count as one of their 2 items.
Thank you. Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, the resident is paying for that service, so it seems like we shouldn't really discriminate what they choose to have picked up.
Yeah.
I have a question.
Sure, go ahead.
So you had talked about the reuse area. How do you envision that working as far as like other residents being able to kind of pick through it, or what happens to all the items that are left over afterward?
Ellen, do you want to describe the St. Paul model that's been used?
Sure. So there are reuse areas at some cleanups, and basically, typically there are a number of either city staff people or volunteers at the event who kind of monitor that area to make sure that what's being left in that space is actually something that somebody would find potentially reusable, or might have some value to somebody. Then as people come throughout the day, there may be some parameters on how many items people can take, or sort of there has to be kind of a rotation of, what people can select from that area, so that, one person doesn't just get to come and take everything that's there, but there can be kind of a rotation. And then, unfortunately, at the end of the day, if those items can't be, if they aren't picked up and reused, then they would either be broken down to their component parts and recycled like other materials, or they would end up becoming refuse and being landfilled.
Is there any way you could partner with like a donation center, DFA, Goodwill, something like that, that would take donations to kind of help alleviate that landfill from the items left over?
Sure, there are certain organizations that do take, good furniture and household items, and we have talked with a few of them. Sometimes it depends on their schedules as to whether or not they're available to attend those kinds of events. But yes, that is a possibility that there could be partnership with some of those kinds of organizations to also take materials as well.
Great, thank you.
I see a couple other questions in the chat. There was one individual who was wanting to make it known for the person who had the brush question that the weekly garbage pickup will make arrangements for yard waste, but there is an additional fee for that. You can either pay for the year or buy the bundle. So that was just, I think, a clarifying piece of information. And then another question is, why do we not want salvagers to pick up things during the citywide pickup if they are reusing or recycling the items they pick up?
Well, I think part of that has been some challenges regarding scrappers that might come in and pick up a refrigerator and cut Freon lines that then are leaking into our waterways. That has been an issue in the past, so some of that stuff is things we can't control. I think that we also do understand and see the benefit of items getting picked up for reuse. My point earlier is that it's not really something that the city can completely control when there is that material on the curb, what ultimately happens with it.
Okay, it seems like we've answered all of the questions that people might have. Are there people who want to provide us just feedback at this point in time?
I have a question, if that's still okay.
Sure.
And forgive me if you answered it previously, but with this new voucher system, are you still planning on charging all Bloomington residents the fee, whether they use the vouchers or not? Will that still be on the water and trash bill going forward?
Yes, the way that's structured is a fee similar to the curbside cleanup fee, where all residents are paying that fee, regardless if they choose to schedule a voucher pickup or not. The way that we look at this is more of a system-wide approach, where it is an opportunity that's accessible for all garbage and recycling customers. And so by having it paid for by all residents, we're able to get a volume-based pricing for that pickup. For example, right now, if a resident wanted to schedule a pickup of a bulky item at their curb, it costs about $53, I believe, for a single mattress to be picked up. So through the system-wide approach, we are able to really bring down that price and make it something that is more affordable for residents, and therefore discourages residents from maybe disposing of those items in places that they shouldn't be.
Okay, so my follow-up question would be, the only way to not pay that fee going forward is to cancel the trash and recycling going forward? And then I wouldn't be charged the cleanup fee each time?
Yeah, there is an option for residents who can prove that they're self-hauling their garbage and recycling to opt out of all of our services. So that is an option. We do require proof of that, and there is an application, and it is something that the city will monitor to make sure that residents are continuing to self-haul their materials. And if you do choose to do that, then yes, you would also not have access to those bulky item vouchers or pay that fee.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
So
there
again,
aren't-
would anybody like to give us some feedback on the program as they heard it tonight?
Yeah, I'll go. I feel like some data is missing, like things like how much trash was actually put out and scavenged, because we only measured at the pickup time. So an actual true volume may be missing. And that's probably a pretty important factor in some of these calculations that we have going here. The other thing is, I think this could go swing so far one way or the other that it's really hard to understand if it's going to be successful or not. We could have a lot of people in line waiting to drop stuff off and find out we need to have a lot broader program and we can increase the cost. We're going to have almost no one dropping off because it's just easy to break it down and throw it in your trash, and then it goes, to the landfill or to the burn spot anyway as something maybe you didn't want to go there. So that's that we're not necessarily tracking those things. Also, the idea that the garbage trucks are putting all the exhaust into the air doesn't really hold water when you put all those cars, sitting around waiting and going through a line that, let's face it, half the people are not going to be prepared for the way the stuff has to go in the car. We know that you can get some, you're not going to get anywhere near all people. So it's going to be time with all these cars idling and stuff. So I don't think that's an environmental impact. I think some increased recycling certainly could be, but there's probably other ways we can do that. I think losing the convenience is a tough thing for me, and it makes me question the value of the program at all. Well, you can buy additional vouchers. I'm sorry, there was a question in the room here. So,
Sorry.
thank you.
Thank you for your comments.
Yeah, I would just second that. I think that was the first thing when I read the proposal was the data did not look at the full, the week leading up to the collection. And I do fear that, to the comment, that a certain amount of reusables will just end up in the trash. Smaller items that people would typically put out, knowing that I don't put anything out myself, but I've seen my neighbors put out little bikes and just different things that they're like, yeah, someone will come get it, as opposed to easily just putting it in the trash going forward.
Thank you for your comments.
Hi, can I say something?
Sure.
Hi, my name is Eric. I've lived in Bloomington off and on for 25 years, and the Curbside Cleanup program is one of the most green and environmentally friendly programs I've ever seen. And it's something that's kind of unique to Bloomington, and it's really cool when you tell people about it. People are like, wow, that's a really great idea. And when they see the number of pickers and people coming by and picking things up off the curb, you really get a sense for how much is actually reused this way. Now, I understand that the city ran a study, but every picture that I've seen of recyclable trash left on the curb is post-rainstorm. And so there will naturally be less reuse and picking happening after a rainstorm. So I think it's a little bit of a mistake to use this one study's data point to make sweeping policy changes, because in 25 years of my own personal experience, I've seen incredible amounts of recycling and reuse. And at the end of the day, these policy changes, they're not going to change the amount of trash that people have, right? You're just making it harder for them to get rid of it. I agree that there's a culture of throwaway consumption, but this isn't addressing it. People are still going to dump illegally if it's hard to get rid of their trash. And personally, I'd rather the trash be picked up and put in a proper landfill than in the rivers or lakes or woods. And people are saying that the program is too expensive, but per the February 21st Bloomington briefing, here's a direct quote. At an annual cost of $53.04 for residents, this program is a bargain. So even whoever is writing the Bloomington briefing believes that this is a good plan. And finally, inclusion and equity. Those are important words in 2021, but I don't understand how this is more accessible or inclusive. Sure, People with trucks that live at, multi-family units can now pay money to drop things off. But what about elderly folks? What about people that don't have trucks? So to me, this is just bad policy. I think Curbside Cleanup is a great program. And if we need to add some city drop-off events, that would make sense to me. But to get rid of this just seems short-sighted and penny-wise and pound-foolish. Thank you.
Thank you, Eric. I appreciate your comments.
May I just respond to Mr. Brandis?
Sure, go ahead, Angie.
Thank you. I'm a resident of Bloomington, and I volunteered to take part in the study as a master composter recycler to track and evaluate the items that were left on the curb for the 2019 curbside cleanup. And I can attest, having volunteered for several of the pickup days, that there was a huge volume of material that was just cardboard, and many days there was no rain. It had been put out 15 minutes before pickup, and so it was still in very good condition. And I think based on my experience, what I saw indicated that there is an issue with a lot of the material being put out that is not being recycled, and that could be. And so I
guess, and I appreciate your response. My main point, though, is that the people that are putting that trash out there, they're not going to put it on Facebook Marketplace. They're not going to put it on Craigslist. They're just going to toss it somewhere. You know what I mean? That to me, it's human nature. Those people aren't going to look for alternatives. It's just going to probably get tossed wherever's convenient.
I don't know that that's fair to make sweeping assumptions about the residents of our city, but I'm sure there are definitely people who would not make an effort to recycle. But I just wanted to speak to the fact that having looked at those piles, I did see a lot of material that could be reused or recycled, and I do just want to voice my support for this program as an effective change in policy that will change the habits of our residents, as well as make the program more sustainable for the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Angie. Thank you for your time. And this is a time I won't call on anybody, but you can feel free to come in and speak about the program and your thoughts and reactions to what you have seen and heard this evening.
Is there any reason that we could not expand the cleanup days to be 4 times a year, and perhaps have on the day of pickup, where the trash haulers are coming to pick up the stuff that's truly refuse, to have a panel truck following along with them, be a team of 2 trucks following along behind and saying, yeah, that chair should go into this truck to go to beds for bridging or wherever, so that it doesn't necessarily say everything that's left on the curb the day of pickup is going to go into trash, period, end of story. So that we're tag teaming, if you will, with a multiple approach on that day. Thank you.
Laura, do you want to answer that as a question?
Sure. As we looked at different alternatives to the program, the first thing we looked at was how can we keep our current model at the curb, which we know is a well-loved model, and increase the opportunity to have items picked up for recycling. We did look into, received a price from an organization that would collect, for example, mattresses separately for recycling. Adding them as an additional vendor for an additional collection increases the cost of the program. I think it was by about $150,000. So there could be an opportunity to do that, but doesn't accomplish a reduction in cost. It would increase the cost for residents. And at the same time, it's adding another set of trucks on the road emitting carbon during the event. And potentially that could be offset by the benefit of recycling those items, but based on our analysis, the amount of money it would add to our current program didn't seem like the best solution for how we could recycle and reuse more in different alternatives.
We did talk to organizations like Bridging as well. And unfortunately, picking up materials in that fashion after they've been out on the curb tends to not work really well for them for a couple of different reasons. The volume of material is something that they can't handle in a single day. They just can't take in that amount of material in a short period of time, and they don't have the staff to be able to accommodate that. But they're also very concerned about materials that have been left out for a couple of days because they tend to get very damaged as a result of, just being outside in the elements. We did talk to a place just to see if we could do some recycling of carpet for the materials in that way as well. But again, once the materials have been out on the curb for any period of time, moisture and just dirt and those kinds of things tend to not lend themselves very well for reuse. The other thing is, at a drop-off event, there are some opportunities to be able to break down different kinds of objects into their component parts. So you might have, let's say, a lawnmower that's comprised of metal and may have rubber tires or those kinds of things. At a cleanup event where all of the vendors are, kind of on the spot right there, there is some opportunity to do a further breaking down of some of those items right on the spot.
Other questions, comments, reactions?
I have a question. I'm
Sure.
a new Bloomington resident, so I'm new to the Curbside Cleanup event, and it seems it's not a program that I've had access to in previous places that I've lived. You have to get creative with how you dispose of your bulky items in many other cities around the Twin Cities. But I was curious, I've heard a lot of concern about illegal dumping for folks who can't get rid of these items at their curbside or have the ability to bring them to a drop-off event. I was curious if any research was done into how big of a problem illegal dumping is in cities that don't have a curbside cleanup event, and potentially even currently in the city of Bloomington, how frequent that is, or how many pounds might be dumped somewhere of these types of items.
Sure. So as we researched other cities with programs that have drop-offs and the bulky item vouchers, we did ask them about illegal dumping. And in those cities that we did have asked, they cited that it is not a big issue in the city. There are still instances of illegal dumping, but they have felt like the programs that they have available for residents have helped to keep that at a level that isn't out of the normal.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Joanna.
I'll add my 2 cents.
Sure.
Well,
Hi, David. Thank you.
Great. Hi there. One of the things one of the big benefits I see from this program is that there's an awful lot of gasoline and diesel fuel burned by scrappers as they go around day after day during this pickup period. And at least today, we see this, and my internet connection seems to be a little unstable, so I hope you're hearing me.
You did break off there, so you
Okay.
were saying about the pickers coming through.
With due respect to the scrappers, I understand this is a good source of income for them. That's an awful lot of diesel fuel and gasoline that's burned going around the neighborhoods, and bringing this to a central location, one way or another, they only have to drive to one place to get what's left over. Some of the details, and I should say in Massachusetts, when we lived there, this was the way of life. There was no pickup for anything except wet garbage. So everything went to the town dump. And there was this pile for metals and pile for magazines and so on and so on. People took that for granted. It worked quite well. I built 2 great bicycles for our twins out of parts from there. The other details I see is to make sure that we're taking as much advantage as we can of systems that are already available. Now, a couple that come to mind, CFL drop-offs at Menards or Home Depot. That's going on. Excel will pick up a refrigerator for $50 and pay you $50 to do it. And there's FreeCycle and the neighborhood news network. I forget the exact name of it. That all give people an opportunity to give stuff away, and publicizing those things will help also.
Thank you for your comments, David.
Bottom line, I think I like this. I think it's a great improvement.
Thank you.
And some of us will disagree with that, and I'm one of those.
Okay.
One, being that this is kind of an option to give, or a chance to just give some extra thoughts, I'll say one thing, David, as you were talking, made me think, if we've considered like we said, the sustainability side of the cost and how it keeps getting more expensive. Like you said, there's a lot of scrap that is valuable as well. And I wonder if there's a way that this program could consider generating that income to help offset the cost of the program. The idea of the recycling truck going alongside the other one, granted it's 2 trucks every day, but I'm sure there's still valuable scrap left that I know we don't want going into the landfill. It would sure be great if that was recycled and put back in to pay for part of the program. I'm sure there's a lot of different variations of how that could be done as well, but even with the pickup days or, whichever plan we land on, let's try to have the Bloomington residents scrap be used to offset how much we're paying for this.
Thank you. I think we have a little more time if we have a couple last comments. Okay, well, not hearing any last comments. I think at this time, we'll just close the comment period. If something still comes to mind, you still can submit it in the chat box. We'll go ahead and address those. So direct you to the additional comments there in the chat box, and we'll share that with the project team and the Sustainability Commission. But at this time, I'll just move it back over to John so he can describe next steps to the group here.
All right, I think I remembered to unmute, which is the important first step. So to wrap up, the next steps we have planned is to continue gathering feedback through the online community survey. If you haven't filled that out, please fill that out. And after analyzing that feedback and feedback from the listening sessions, we're going to report back to City Council in early summer.
And for those of you who may still be listening in on the phone and can't see the screen, maybe we can share the two different addresses. Laura, would you mind reading those off? I've got part of the screen covered up on my screen here.
Sure. The best way to continue to provide feedback is to visit our Let's Talk Bloomington page. And on that page, you can find a link to our survey, as well as our other links to the study and other presentations regarding the proposed plan. So that website address is blm.mn/let's talk. That's LETSTALK. I will follow up most likely tomorrow with these links as well, and responses to the questions that we received today. And if you have any additional comments or questions, you can also contact me directly, and I'll follow up with my email as well. But that is, I can say that tonight as well. It's Laura Horner, so it's L Horner, HORNER, at bloomingtonmn.gov, or by phone at 952-563-8726.
Great, thanks, Laura. Thank you everyone to the team, and I really appreciate everybody that tuned in this evening and is willing to participate, listen to the proposal, and share your comments with us. We really do appreciate you taking the time this evening, and appreciate everyone being engaged and sharing your voice with us. And so with that, thank you everyone, and have a great night. Good night, all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.